Aaron and I met in our 20s, two ambitious individuals navigating the uncertainties of life. He had an understated charm, the kind that drew people in without effort. His composed and steady demeanor stood in stark contrast to my vibrant and often restless energy, yet we balanced each other in a way that felt almost effortless, or so I believed. Our connection deepened quickly, like an electrifying summer storm, intense, exhilarating, and all-consuming. Aaron was the kind of partner who gave with his whole heart. He had a way of making even the smallest gestures feel monumental. Whether it was tucking a thoughtful note into my bag, surprising me with coffee during grueling workdays, or listening patiently as I poured out my frustrations. He was my rock, the one who seemed to know exactly what to say when the weight of the world felt unbearable. 3 years into our relationship, we tied the knot. The wedding was simple yet stunning, held in the same church where Aaron's parents had exchanged vows decades before. I can still see his face as I walked down the aisle, his smile radiating a warmth that seemed capable of conquering any hardship. In that moment, I was certain of one thing. I believed in forever. The early years of our marriage were idyllic. We built a life filled with spontaneous weekend getaways, leisurely Sunday mornings, and evenings spent cooking together to the soft hum of music. Aaron embodied everything I had ever dreamed of in a partner, supportive, steady, and loving. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. As time went on, subtle fractures began to emerge in our relationship, barely noticeable at first, but growing steadily. Our demanding careers left little room for connection, and the stress of juggling professional ambitions with personal lives began to weigh on us. Aaron, in particular, threw himself into his work, often staying late to chase the promotion he had been working toward for years. I encouraged him, of course, but couldn't ignore the growing emotional distance between us. Meanwhile, I found myself struggling in ways I couldn't fully articulate. My role as a marketing manager at a high-pressure company left me drained, and despite my deep love for Aaron, I started to feel unseen. His unflappable composure, once a source of comfort, began to feel like a barrier. I questioned whether he truly noticed the turmoil brewing within me. I told myself it was my responsibility to figure things out, but resentment quietly settled in as the gap between us widened. And then there was Jonathan, my boss, confident and magnetic. He possessed an energy that seemed to command every room he entered. He had a knack for making people feel valued, as if their words carried immense weight. At first, our interactions were harmless. Casual conversations during coffee breaks or brief chats after meetings. But as time went on, something shifted. His compliments lingered a bit too long. His gaze felt more intentional, and his attention became something I unconsciously sought. At a time when I was wrestling with self-doubt and emotional disconnection, Jonathan's validation felt like a lifeline. I didn't set out to betray Aaron. I loved him, or at least I thought I did. Yet, the more time I spent with Jonathan, the more I found myself drawn to the way he made me feel. He saw me in a way I desperately craved, as if I were someone extraordinary, someone worth noticing. The allure was undeniable. What started as innocent text exchanges filled with jokes and mutual encouragement during high-pressure projects gradually morphed into something far deeper. I tried convincing myself it was harmless, that I was overanalyzing friendly gestures. But deep down, I knew I was teetering on the edge of a slippery slope, one that could undo everything Aaron and I had built together. The first time Jonathan and I crossed a line was during an office celebration marking a significant client acquisition. The evening began with a lively team outing, but as the night wore on, only Jonathan and I remained at the bar. He walked me to my car afterward, his presence both steady and electrifying. When he leaned in, I didn't stop him. I wish I could claim it was a fleeting lapse in judgment, but the truth is, a part of me wanted it to happen. That single moment spiraled into countless others, and before I realized it, I was living a life split in two. By day, I was Aaron's loyal wife, striving to keep our home life intact despite the widening chasm beneath the surface. By night, I was someone entirely different, swept up in the intoxicating thrill of something forbidden with Jonathan. I convinced myself it was insignificant, that it didn't mean anything real. But the guilt gnawed at me relentlessly. It seeped into quiet moments at home, where Aaron's concern for me grew more evident. He'd ask if everything was all right, his voice full of genuine care. I would force a smile, brush off his worries with excuses. I'm just exhausted, or work's been overwhelming. Aaron trusted me. He always had. His unwavering patience and love made it easy to deceive him, but I could sense the cracks forming in his belief. Love may blind us, but only for so long. As the weeks blurred into months, the strain of my duplicity became unbearable. Every stolen glance, every hushed conversation, and every secret message with Jonathan weighed heavily on me. I tried convincing myself I could manage it all, that I could keep both lives from colliding. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was balancing on a fragile tightrope, and it was only a matter of time before I lost my footing. Aaron, perceptive as ever, began noticing the changes. He saw the way my thoughts drifted during our dinners, the subtle tension in my posture whenever my phone buzzed, and the flimsy excuses I made to stay late at work. His questions started softly, cautiously. Is something bothering you? Is work wearing you out? I dismissed his concerns with a practiced smile, but the flicker of doubt in his eyes lingered. His patience, however, wasn't limitless. One evening, Aaron came home earlier than expected. I wasn't prepared for it. He had messaged earlier saying he'd be out late for a client dinner. I was on the couch texting Jonathan when I heard the front door creak open. There he stood, holding a takeout bag in one hand and his briefcase in the other. "Hey," he greeted, his tone calm but edged with unease. "I thought I'd surprise you with your favorite Thai food." My stomach sank as my phone slipped from my fingers, landing screen up on the cushion beside me. For a brief moment, I was paralyzed. The screen displayed a glaringly visible notification. Jonathan's name and his latest message. "I can't stop thinking about you." Aaron's gaze shifted to my phone, his expression shifting in a way that made my heart drop. He didn't say anything right away, but the silence was deafening. The warmth that always radiated from his eyes was gone, replaced by a coldness that pierced me more deeply than any words could. "Who's Jonathan?" he finally asked, his voice unsettlingly calm. It wasn't the question itself that terrified me. It was a restraint in his tone, the composure that hinted at just how shattered he truly was. I fumbled, searching for something, anything, that might explain away the notification he'd seen. But the damage was done. He had all the evidence he needed. "Clara," he said, setting the takeout bag on the table with deliberate precision, "I need you to tell me the truth." And so I did. The words poured out, jagged and raw. I confessed to everything. The late-night messages, the moments I'd shared with Jonathan, and the validation I had been chasing. I tried to explain how lost I'd felt, how invisible I'd become in my own mind, even though Aaron had never intentionally made me feel that way. Through tears, I begged him for forgiveness, gripping his hands in a desperate attempt to keep him close. But Aaron didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice or hurl accusations. He just stood there, staring at me with an expression so full of hurt that I couldn't bear to meet his eyes. When I reached out to touch him, he recoiled as if my touch was a flame. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he said, his voice breaking under the weight of his emotions. The next day, Aaron was gone. There was no confrontation, no argument. Instead, he left a note on the kitchen counter, its message brief and distant. "I need time to think. Please don't contact me." The silence that followed was crushing. For the first time, I was forced to confront the full impact of my choices. I hadn't just hurt him. I had dismantled the foundation of trust and love we had spent years building. Weeks blurred together in a haze of regret and loneliness. Aaron stayed away, communicating only through his lawyer. Then, on a gray, rainy morning, I found an envelope waiting for me. Inside were divorce papers. As I sat at the table, Rain tapping against the window, I stared at the documents for what felt like hours. When I finally opened them, there was a short note tucked inside. I don't want to fight. Just sign. I only want the house and the car. My hands trembled as I signed. Tears spilled onto the paper, smudging the ink, but I didn't hesitate. I had no right to contest anything. Not after everything I'd done. Aaron deserved peace, even if it came at the expense of my own. The last time I saw him was the day he came to collect his belongings. He knocked on the door instead of using his key, a small, devastating detail that drove home just how far apart we had grown. I opened the door, and he stepped inside without a word. His expression was unreadable as he moved through the house, packing his clothes, books, and the framed photographs that once decorated our walls. Each item he took felt like another piece of me was being carried away. I wanted to say something, to beg him to stay, but my voice refused to cooperate. When he finished, he paused at the door, his hand resting on the knob. For a moment, it seemed like he might speak, but when he did, his words were soft and final. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. And then he left. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, and just like that, it was over. A month later, the divorce was finalized. We never spoke again. I heard through mutual friends that Aaron had moved to a new city, found a fresh start, and was thriving. Part of me was relieved to know he was happy again, but another part, the part that still loved him, ached with the knowledge that I would never be a part of that happiness. The thought of Aaron building a new life without me lingered in my mind like a shadow. Therapy became my sanctuary, a space where I could confront the mess I had created. It wasn't just the affair I had to reckon with. It was the loneliness, the deep-seated insecurities, and the overwhelming need for validation that had driven me down this destructive path. I had destroyed the most meaningful relationship of my life, and no amount of introspection could erase the damage. The guilt was unrelenting, but the deepest pain came from realizing how much Aaron had truly loved me, his unwavering patience, his kindness, and the quiet strength with which he had supported me. He had been everything I needed, and I had betrayed him for fleeting moments of attention that, in the end, meant nothing. 5 years passed, and one day I received an unexpected invitation, a wedding. Emily, one of Aaron's closest friends, was getting married. Seeing her name on the envelope felt like a blow, but what struck me harder was the venue. It was the same church where Aaron and I had once exchanged vows. For a moment, I considered discarding the invitation, but something stopped me. Maybe it was a desire for closure, or perhaps it was an unspoken need to see Aaron one last time. Either way, I decided to go. The church looked almost untouched by time. The stained glass windows cast colorful patterns across the pews. Candles flickered softly, and the scent of fresh roses filled the air. Each detail brought a rush of memories I wasn't prepared for. As I scanned the room, my heart stopped when I saw him. Aaron stood near the altar, his profile illuminated by the soft light. He looked more refined than I remembered, his dark suit tailored perfectly, his hair now streaked with gray. He exuded a quiet confidence that made it impossible to look away. He wasn't alone. A woman with striking red hair stood beside him, her laughter light and melodic as she rested her hand on his arm. The sight sent a sharp pang of jealousy through me. Was she the one who had replaced me? Did she give him the happiness I had failed to provide? I tried to slip into a pew unnoticed, but Aaron's eyes found mine. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. His expression was unreadable. Neither anger nor affection, just distant recognition. I quickly lowered my gaze, focusing on the ceremony as waves of emotion crashed over me. When the vows were exchanged and the reception began, I lingered near the exit, torn between staying and fleeing before the memories overwhelmed me. Then I heard a voice. Clara. It was unmistakable, soft yet firm. I turned to see Aaron standing a few steps away, his eyes steady but detached. He looked like the man I had loved, but there was a calmness in him now that felt foreign. "Hi, Aaron," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. He gave a slight nod. "Are you doing okay?" he asked, his tone even, devoid of judgment. Therapy helps, I said, my throat tightening. I'm trying to make sense of everything. He nodded again, his expression unreadable. That's good. I'm glad. Tears welled in my eyes. I'm so sorry, I said, my voice trembling. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to tell you how deeply sorry I am. I ruined the best thing I ever had. I was selfish, and you didn't deserve that. Aaron looked at me for a long moment, his face softening slightly before hardening again. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. But I've made peace with it. I had to. It wasn't easy. It hurt more than I can explain, but it's behind me now. His eyes drifted toward the red-haired woman, who was chatting with someone near the dance floor. I found peace, he added. A surge of jealousy hit me, but I quickly pushed it aside. I had no right to feel that way anymore. I never stopped loving you, I admitted, tears streaming down my face. But I know I wasn't the person you deserved. For a fleeting moment, his gaze softened, but the tenderness disappeared almost as quickly as it came. I hope you find what you're looking for, Clara, he said, his voice steady and final. You deserve that, but it won't be with me. I nodded, the tears falling freely now. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with the weight of my regrets. I had lost him forever, and no amount of remorse could change that.